Alicia Sanderman earned her Bachelor's of Art in Professional Writing from Carnegie Mellon University and was awarded a scholarship to complete her Master's of Art in Teaching in English as a Second Language from Georgetown University. Her past ESL experience consists of teaching at In Lingua English Center at Northern Virginia Community College. A former research associate at the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition, she has published several reports on language education.
Okay, as Mimi mentioned, one of my passions and my firm beliefs in teaching English is that we have to have content to teach the language through. And this is not exactly the most recent development in our field, but something that the tide is shifting, and really language teachers also have to be versed in a subject in addition to just grammar or writing skills. So the title of my presentation today is Teaching Language Through History, and my project was based in the National Museum of the American Indian on the 4th floor, the Our Peoples exhibit. So my pedagogical approach, as I mentioned, it's based on some content, in this case history and experiential learning. As we go through that, vocabulary and all 4 domains of reading, writing, speaking, and listening will be a part to reinforce the vocabulary and the language development. Our theme was race and post-racial as it relates to American Indians. And our objective in the course, which is EL 104, it's an essay level class, so they're producing a cause and effect essay as one of the objectives in our course. This is the last class that students take before they exit into the mainstream. So there's a high level of demand here for language and comprehension. In order to prepare my students, I try to scaffold and build some background knowledge. So I asked my students to conduct an interview. Many of the students hadn't heard of American Indians before. And so I asked them to interview an American about their perceptions of American Indians. And they had to prepare these questions, write a summary, and then, of course, the language objectives using reported speech in their summary to talk about their judgments of the interview. When the students were actually in the museum, unlike Andrea, I had to guide them through much more specifically rather than leaving it open-ended. And this is because I'm controlling the language that they're going to see. So part of what I did was direct them, first of all, to take notes on the cause and effect relationships in the Our Peoples exhibit. That exhibit basically posits that European contact with the American Indians was the single most important, all-encompassing change for the world. So all of these factors here were affected, and still today you can see the vestiges of these effects. Okay, so you see here I have these weights here. This is representing my compelling language. Okay, and I explain it this way to the students as well, that certain words have power and they have strength, especially in an exhibit that's talking about how 90% of the population was decimated, and it's comparing the American Indians' experience to the Jews in the Holocaust. Okay, so for this section, when they were in the museum, what they had to do was visit different parts of the sections in the exhibit, find the original sentence, and look for what we call, the jargon is collocations. But basically, it's just a phrase that occurs naturally. So something like fell victim to is a phrase or a chunk of language that the students can hold on to and learn as one piece. So they're not using the energy to put each word in place. Also, what's important about this is they're being exposed to the language authentically. This was actually from the exhibit. It's in a context. They're seeing visual images to support their learning. It's communicative. And then to make sure they understand, I asked them to paraphrase the collocations. So there are some students working on it, hard at work. The third part is this final wall as you leave the exhibit, which to me is one of the most profound parts of the exhibit. It basically represents what little we have left of the American Indian history and how much we have lost. So I asked the students to reflect on the emotional impact. After the visit, of course, you come back to class and you hope that all your students have made it in time, but inevitably some students haven't. So I try to prepare for that as well. And I created a video of pictures and words basically demonstrating the cause and effect relationships evident in the exhibit so that some students who weren't able to make it were still able to understand what we were talking about. And the first brief writing that I had them do was just a simple reaction to the exhibit, answering some of these questions. Again, with the visual recall to help them remember. Okay, now we have these compelling phrases. So now it's time to do some target production and practice, right, to make sure they know how to use these phrases. So what I asked them to do is to draw visual representations. Okay, obviously for language it's helpful to know the syllables, the stress, and of course the ultimate goal to be able to use it in a sentence. So they draw a representation. This is my example of a host of deadly microbes. So all the students have a little time to be more creative. And I've found that the visual representation helps immensely with their recall of this vocabulary. So once they've practiced these terms, we've all had a laugh at their different pictures. I asked them to go back to that written reaction that they wrote and to take some of these collocations and see where could they put them back in. How can you make this more compelling? So instead of saying a lot of diseases, now go back and write a host of deadly microbes. So it's kind of an assisted editing type of exercise. And the results were very amazing, I have to say. Okay, so from there, we were able to just delve right in to the discussions on race. Okay, and when possible, to lighten the mood, a little comedy. It was interesting too because it took some explanation for the students to realize even who was being depicted in these comics. Okay, so we talked about what did you gather from your interviews? And what about your own experience, right? How did maybe some of these stereotypes that came up in your interviews apply to you? You know, because they're immigrants, they're very familiar with stereotypes and discrimination. In fact, for some of them, it's the first word they learn is discrimination. From there, we delved even further into very philosophical questions. These are adults, and I'm preparing them for any course on campus, so we're just going right into it. Is there a value of race? Is there a value to separate each other and identify by race? Are there problems inherent in it? Okay, this question for Manjula. Why does the Smithsonian organize some of its museums according to race, right? And then they had a chance to address the question, are we in a post-racial society? So from here, they had a choice of 2 cause and effect essay topics. The first one, drawing primarily on our classroom discussion and requiring outside research, would have been the effects of electing President Obama. And the second one, drawing primarily on the exhibit itself, contact with the Americas. Notice I've underlined certain features of the language. So in the first question, I was looking for the production of the present perfect, have been, right? So to show throughout the time from the past when Obama was elected until now. So I'm modeling the form and also eliciting that form in the question. And for the second one, drawing their attention to the possessive and the plurals, the Americas. Many of them had never heard the Americas plural. Okay, so I used Webspiration, which is an online tool for brainstorming, and the students had all sorts of specific details after having gone to the exhibit. Plenty to write about. These essays were long. And I have to say, although I thought this would be a great project, and I thought, the experience of being in the museum would be great, I just was not prepared for the level of language that the students produced. I was blown away. I was really astounded they got the concept of this compelling language in a way that I don't think they would have without the exhibit. They realized 9 out of 10 Indians died. This changed the world forever, unalterably. And their writing demonstrated it, and that to me was such a victory to know that these students, maybe they got a glimmer into the power of language and the joy of getting that right, the turn of phrase exactly right. So those were some of the highlighted terms the student used. So that was from my perspective. I also have a student here, my friend Coffee from EL 104, who's going to give you a little bit of his perspective, and thank you for your time.
Okay, I'm just here to talk a little bit about our visit to the Smithsonian Museum. EL 104 class has been a hard work and at the same time a really fun class. The Smithsonian project had been one of the best assignments we had ever had in a writing class. The Indian Museum was a place where we had more information about the American Indian people, and personally, it was the place where I knew about American Indian native people. So just by going to the museum, you learn about the history even more than the actual Indian people. For the assignment we had first, that we had to go and ask questions Indian people about what they know about their original people. And we found that most of them, they don't know that there was some native Indian in America. And some who knew, they didn't know more, they don't know too much about it. They just know that there were some people and they don't really know what they did, what they used to do, everything about them. So we learned about the way they were living, what they used to eat, what they had done to survive to the European colonization. All those things were really gigantic and very important to learn about. One important fact that amazed me during the visit was the number of languages that the Indians were speaking before the arrival of the Europeans. We saw the picture that We Are the World. We learned that that picture contains 250 languages, and that is only the languages of the people who survived after the colonization. 90% of the population died. So actually, if all those people had lived until now, there might be thousands of languages we will be speaking in America right now. So in summary, Smithsonian was the best place to learn enough about the American especially the native Indians people. It was just a fun class, a sublime class, an exciting class, and the best assignment ever. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention I didn't feed any of that to him. It was all on his own. And isn't it interesting that his comments were on the history? So even though his language developed, the experience for him was learning about something while developing the language and the writing skills. So thank you so much for your time. He took off of work. So thank you so much.